All right, we're live. Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal.
That would make me terrible, Troy.
I'm Treacherous Trista.
And we're joined by legendary horror filmmaker Brian Yuzna. It's very cool to have you here.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Yeah. So this month we're doing Doctors of December month. So I thought you were a perfect guest to come on the show.
I've done a couple doctors.
Yes, yeah. I hate to ask if you have a favorite.
A dentist,
yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I think a dentist we can still consider them a doctor.
I think
I know there's a big thing going on right now about who you can call a doctor or not, but
oh, right. Yeah.
we'll leave that to another show, I think. So to go back, I'm wearing the Reanimator shirt. So to go back to the original Reanimator, how did you get involved to be the producer?
Well, I optioned the material and developed it. Stuart Gordon had, with his partners, had written a pilot for a TV show based on Reanimator. And I liked the idea, but I wanted to do a feature. So I optioned it and hired them to develop it into a feature. And then I raised the money to make it. So I got the job of producer by paying for the movie. And you'll find that this is a truism throughout the entertainment industry, the movie business.
Uh-huh.
And that is that if you pay for the movie, you can do whatever you want on it. You can star in it, you can write the music, you can direct it, you can do anything. What's hard is not to pay for it and to get a job.
That's the secret.
Right. That's interesting that he wanted it to be a TV series, because it's kind of, I think, before its time, because now, like a short, like a 8 or 13 episode series is more of a thing that happens today than would have happened at the time.
Well, you have to understand that back then, there really wasn't even cable the way we see it now. I think this was 1983, and so he probably wrote it in 82. At that time, there was HBO and Cinemax, but there was CNN. But
it probably wouldn't have fit on CNN.
Cable.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't, now we look at, he wrote it for TV, not for cable. They wanted it to be on broadcast television. And, but at that time, of course, I wanted to get into the movie business. I wasn't interested in the TV business. Now, for example, I'm all about being interested in limited series on cable, because that's kind of where everything's gone as far as doing interesting things. I mean, of course you can with movies, but the idea that you can have a story go 6 hours is kind of fun, or 12 or whatever. On broadcast, it would be like a broadcast show, especially back then. It would be, you couldn't do a lot of the extreme stuff by any means.
The head scene would not be happening back on.
That wasn't in the original.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now, the original script actually ended with Halsey getting reanimated. So if you know the movie, that's sort of the middle of it. It's when Dr. Hill wasn't in the script. So there was no guy without a head. That was just the direction we developed it.
Mm-hmm.
I had never read the stories until after I read the pilot. And so I read the stories and I saw there was a guy carrying his head around. And I thought, well, if I'm going to risk my future and borrow money to make a movie, and it's going to be a horror movie, by God, I want the guy that's carrying his head around. I've always been a fan of those movies with the talking heads, the brain that wouldn't die, those things. To me, that means horror.
Yeah. You made a wise decision. But going like full circle, could you see that today working as a series, a Reanimator series?
Sure, I've tried. I'm trying to do that. I've had interest.
Mhm.
I'm not sure exactly how you do it. It's, there was something kind of unique about what Stewart laid down in Reanimator based on his career up to that time of being a theater director and one who loved to shock his audience. I think back in the Reanimator era, the early 80s, even into the mid 80s, that kind of gore was something that was pretty much strictly a horror movie element. After, into the late 80s and into the 90s, the action movies started incorporating a lot of gore.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of appropriated that part of, some of the horror movie conventions, with series like Rambo and, where you just, you not only ran around and shot weapons and punched people, but there was a lot of horror to it as well.
Did you ever feel that they could get away with more since they weren't labeled as horror?
Yes. And I think the first action movie, and this goes before the 80s, of course, the first action movie that really set down that aesthetic was the Wild Bunch, I think, the Peckinpah movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the shootout at the end of that is full of blood bags and stuff. And up till then, a lot of shooting, they'd get a little pinprick of red and fall dead, but I think, yes, they, especially independent horror movies, have always had to fight a little harder to keep excessive or extreme elements. But it's not so much the genre, although that does include it, but it has to do with the size of the movies. The MPAA used to sit pretty hard on independent movies, horror movies, whereas when someone like Spielberg had a heart being ripped out in the second Indiana Jones movie, they just went ahead and made a new category for it.
Yeah, PG-13.
And I certainly noticed that in the 80s and 90s. With Reanimator, I never submitted it for a rating. It doesn't have a rating. It's unrated. And the reason I didn't is because I just knew that they would just cut out all the good stuff. And, or at least what I thought was the payoff stuff.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that the movie wouldn't have worked, just because it's a good movie. In certain different territories, they always edited the movies, and that's continued on to today, although not near as far, because now with digital, it's too easy to get everything everywhere. So countries really have a hard time truly editing the movies. But when you sell a movie, and like I said, it was much more like this in the 80s, 90s than it is today. You give the foreign territory that buys it the ability to change the title and to edit the movie according to their censorship. And different places have different issues. So for example, in certain parts of Asia, especially China, anything to do with supernatural is they don't want, but they might accept, lots, in Japan, you can't show any genitalia, so they fuzz it out. And I think they still do that. In England, they had this era of what they called video nasties in the 80s. There's this tendency for different countries and here too, to blame horror movies for violence. So if somebody does something bad and they also watched horror movies, they say that that violence comes from the movies. But of course, that's kind of ridiculous on the face of it. There's been a whole lot of violence in this world before movies were ever invented.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's the nature of people. But they do that, and so they had this idea. I think there was some killings in the UK. I don't know if it was in the late 70s or early 80s. It was when the video started, as a real thing. And they decided that it was based on this guy watching horror movies, and so they called them video nasties, and they made it. They started cutting. They started kind of censoring pretty heavily. So a movie like Reanimator, when it was first released in England, it had I think 10 minutes cut out of it. A lot of time.
A lot, yeah.
So you would have never seen the head giving head scene or anything like that. But you could see it at a cinema club. You could see the uncut one. So the British had like in this country, we have this idea that your home is your castle. You can kill somebody if they try to get in,
right.
and you can do whatever you want in your home. And you can watch whatever you want. And so that's how we look at it. So videos were more acceptable in the home in the United States, whereas if you're showing something in a movie theater, it's a public showing, they're more liable to have more problems with showing something that's considered bad for society. In the UK, they consider that if you put it in a club, it's okay, but you can't do anything in your own home.
Right, this is reversed.
A little bit of it, you can't take those things into your home.
Yeah, it's weird. That's odd.
But every country has this. In Germany, they are specific, very difficult. Even now, they're much more difficult. And there, they have always accepted lots of sex and nudity, but not violent gore, and never gore with women, like sex and violence. It's totally out of it. Whereas here we're all very squeamish about sex, but we're very easy about violence. It's cultural stuff. But I think everything's opened up so much. I mean, some movies some of the stuff that I've had to kind of cut out of movies were a little silly,
Careful, wicked and full.
Yeah. So was it hard to get the movie released as an uncut? Like, was it hard to get cinemas to play it?
Well, what's hard is to show it at a Cineplex and to advertise. So back then, so the idea was if it wasn't rated, that marks it as a porno, right?
Yeah.
There never was an X rating, by the way. I don't think there was ever an X rating, was there? Or yeah, there was, but then at the beginning, X was kind of more adult. Like Midnight Cowboy was X rated. Yeah. And it won the Academy Award. So the idea of X rating originally was that certain things would just tell you that this is adult material and it's not for
even kids. That term, if you say something's for adult today, people assume that it means it's pornographic.
Yeah. But then the porno industry started because Midnight Cowboy, I forget, wasn't that late 60s or early? I think, maybe early 70s.
Yeah, I was thinking
But-
maybe 70, 71.
But that's the same time that Deep Throat came out, and The Devil and Miss Jones, and these were, there was this idea back then that porn was going to be like this, just another genre, that it was, you know, and these movies, and people would go see them, and you know, you could go to the movies, and they would show a trailer for a hardcore porno movie with hardcore scenes in the trailer. And it wasn't, but that was just a brief period of time. And porn, and they tried to make porn movies that were
Like artistic.
bigger budget, that
Okay.
actually had production values and stories and all this kind of stuff. And if you remember, even Francis Ford Coppola, when he was making One from the Heart, he wanted it to have explicit sex in it, because this was considered something that was coming. But I think especially with video, it all changed, and it got to be more and more just kind of, you know, cheaper and kind of more of a, it's always had kind of a lot of, I don't know if it's underworld, but at least shady kind of you know, affinities. Like you always feel like the porn is you know, it's not really on the up and up. And I think a lot of that's because a lot of it is made with first of all, you know, non-tax paid money, and incorporating, you know, sexual exploitation, especially of women, you know, the prostitution and sexual exploitation. And so it sort of had that kind of feeling to it, you know. And with video, they just got cheaper and cheaper. I'm sure you've seen Boogie Nights.
Yeah, I was thinking of Boogie Nights because that's kind of the story in there with
That's the
the
story, is
with
that
the
you know,
director.
he
He was
wants
totally
to make a
against,
great movie,
yeah.
but they're just getting cheaper and cheaper. And now, of course, on the internet, it's broken down completely. Anybody can have a channel with porn and make the money directly. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be done. I mean, if that's sort of the business you want to be in.
Yeah, it's
And
not
horror is just one step up from porn, you know, in the hierarchy of film. You know, it's always been pretty much you know, not really a respectable genre.
Along those lines, when you decided to get involved in horror movies, did any of your family or friends like say, you know, oh, don't get involved in that?
No, I had pretty much done whatever I wanted for quite a while since I left home, and I don't know. It's what I liked. I always liked horror movies. You know, I was a fan, and I don't know. I didn't really ask anybody for their opinion, I guess is what I should say.
Good.
and I showed my family. I mean, I wasn't ever not proud of the movies I made.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying they were all good or they're all wonderful movies. They're not through lack of effort. You know, I tried on every one, but I produced, direct, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes they don't work out, you know. And yes, I wouldn't say I was proud of those, but I just mean in the sense that
No,
I never felt like the material was, I always thought it was kind of exhilarating sometimes to cross borders.
You said you're always a fan of horror movies. Were there any like particular ones that like made you a fan right away?
Well, when I was a little kid, when I was 6 or something, we used to go to the Sunday matinee for kids, and I lived in I was brought up in Latin America, so I was living in Panama at that time, and we didn't have television. This is the 50s, and you'd see a double feature and some Three Stooges cartoons, and maybe a Dick Tracy RKO serial, and one time they showed the creature with the atom brain, and that's kind of it's about, they put these kind of tarantula-looking things inside the brain of dead people, and they have these TV monitors to make them go do bad things, and they're zombies basically. And that really, really bothered me. I couldn't sleep for nights, and my mother vowed we'd never go back to see the Sunday matinee. But I think that kind of gave me the bug, and I saw like the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and that was really nightmarish with some of the effects. And finally, when I got a little older, I remember seeing House on Haunted Hill, and that was sort of my speed, because that was just for fun. And along the way, of course, there was the Hammer stuff, which was pretty disturbing because it was in color, and there was like red blood and heaving breasts, and every time they mixed the sex with the horror, it seems like it'd always be more disturbing. But I think sex and death is what horror is about anyway, viscerally, right? So it was, those kinds of movies really, The Fly, I just loved everything to do with transformations. And I would read ghost stories, and from the time I had a dime, I bought these horror comics, the old EC comics.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And they were always full of people eating brains and husbands killing their wives, and the wives coming back to suck their brains, and it was just really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I really was into it. I just always had that tendency, and I've noticed it in my kind of extended family. One of my brother's sons was into horror, and I've got 4 grandkids, and I let my kids see anything from the time they could toddle over to the.
Yeah, Troy and I are brothers.
I always
our
had a
mom was the
projection
same way.
TV,
So, yeah.
and I'd show them anything, and they came to the sets and the whole thing, but none of them really got into horror, and they saw they were in the movies, and but my daughter's daughter, who's only 5 now, for no good reason. I mean, on the one hand, she wears princess skirts and Moana, and all these kind of LOL toys, but she's really into scary stuff and to making scary drawings. And she rides in the car. She has a little skeleton strapped next to her friend. And who knows why? She's never, ever been kind of exposed to anything like that, So I don't know. Maybe I used to think it was because you became a horror fan because you had some traumatic horror movie experience that kind of stuck with you, and you became kind of like an addict. At first it makes you sick, and then you become addicted to it, But maybe not. Maybe it's just that, it's sort of some weird DNA mix.
Yeah.
Where you think scary stuff is fun.
Mm-hmm. Are you surprised that over maybe probably the last 10 years that zombies have really become mainstream? Because
Wow.
everywhere is zombies. You can get
It's
a little
very
kid's
strange,
t-shirt.
yeah. Well, because I remember when Night of the Living Dead first came out, And I consider that movie to be like the beginning of modern horror.
Yeah.
You know, this era's horror. I think it starts with Night of the Living Dead. And it's not like weren't just lots of crazy stuff like that anyway. It's just that this one tended to kind of work, you know. And as you know, we went further, I remember that because when Reanimator came out, that was also when Return of the Living Dead came out. And of course, there'd already been Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead and, you know, Shockwave, and Zombie, and, you know, these Mario Bava things, you know, and so there was always, you know, there's always been a lot of stuff like that. I mean, it's a staple of horror is that something comes back from the dead. When I got the job to direct and produce and develop the second sequel to Return of the Living Dead, I wondered, I really wanted to do it because I liked both Night of the Living Dead and I like Return of the Living Dead. I think Dan O'Bannon, you know, he's the first one who solved the problem of how to put DC Comics on screen. Before that, they did stuff like Creepshow or comic books in movies. They would actually show a frame and they would try to make it look like the spareness of a comic book drawing. And what Dan O'Bannon did is he showed how to make it more like an EC comic with all this crazy brain eating and exploitative stuff and just the great exuberance of it. And without Return of the Living Dead, I don't think Joel Silver would have had a clue as to how to do the Crypt Keeper and all that stuff. That was Dan O'Bannon, I think, set down the tone for that.
And because of that movie, people, you know, still today associate zombies with eating brains, and that's, I mean, they never were brain eaters until that movie.
Yeah, and so when I asked the company that had the rights and I had signed the deal with, I asked them what they required of for the movie. I said, does it have to be a direct sequel? Do you have to have certain characters in it? Does it have to have certain actors in it? What do you need? I said, does it have to be funny? Because Return of the Living Dead was funny. And they said, no, it doesn't have to be funny. It doesn't have to have any actors or any characters. The only thing we require is that it has the trioxin gas. So the dead have to come back because of the gas. And secondly, it has to have brain eating. So I didn't know how to do brain eating because I had a different, I was going in a non-comic direction. I don't know why. I think it's because I also wanted it to be a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. And Night of the Living Dead isn't funny at all. It's not even ironic. It doesn't even, except at the end when the sheriff, you know, when they're shooting them down, the rednecks.
Yeah.
That I think that, you know, there's some satire there, but in general, it's not at all. Whereas Dan O'Bannon's is strictly a romp. Although it has very, very kind of serious kind of horror stuff in it.
I always think for comedy horror to work, I think both the comedy and I think the horror has to work for it to be a good comedy horror film.
Yeah, and so when I got the chance to do this, I thought about what I would like, because at that time, this is like 1990 or something. I thought, wow, there's just been too many zombie movies. Everything's been done, which is ridiculous to think.
To think 90 now
or 30 years later, it's like it's still going. So that's why one reason why I decided that I wanted a story that had the main character as a living dead. And part of that also was when I made Bride of Re-Animator, the bride doesn't kind of come to life until, I guess, the middle of the third act, maybe. And when I watched the movie, I thought, God, she's the best character, and I should have brought her in earlier. And so on this one, I thought, well, I could just do a whole movie based on that character of someone who's kind of, you know, in that stressful kind of era of being sort of dead and alive at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely the best of the Return of the Living Dead sequels, and it totally works as a standalone movie.
Yeah, it wouldn't have had. Yeah, I think the biggest weakness of that movie is the title.
Interesting.
Because
kind of like
we
Halloween
couldn't
3,
even
I
give,
guess. Yeah.
well, not even that. No, you can do Halloween 3, or you could. It's Return of the Living Dead Part 3. Like Return of the
Right.
Living Dead is
It already is.
already.
Yeah.
It's all. Return of the Living Dead is kind of an alternate sequel to Night of the Living Dead. So it's an alternate one, because there was Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead that Romero did.
Mhm.
But John Russo, the writer of Night of the Living Dead, he ended up with the rights to the title Living Dead. That's why Romero just took out the living, just made it the dead. So he had the rights to the sequel, The Living Dead.
Mhm.
And so Dan O'Bannon did Return of the Living Dead. Well, then when you have there was a sequel to that, and I was doing like the second sequel to the alternate sequel to a horror classic. So it was like, but how do you put a subtitle? Return of the Living Dead 3, give it a title?
The Return again.
It just starts being gobbledygook, gobble. But I think if it hadn't been Return of the Living Dead, it just had a name. Like in Spain, they called it Mortal Zombie. And I thought, well, that's not bad, you know. Or Reanimator in Japan is called Zombie, Z-O-M-B-I.
Oh, really?
You know, yeah, they changed in different, when you license your movie, they can change, or they used to always be able to change the title to whatever they want.
Mhm.
I don't know, you know, now everything's different because of digital, and it's much easier to hang on to, you know, you can insist more that they don't mess around with your movie, although you can't stop them from censorship cuts.
Mhm. Trista, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the extent of medical research required for Reanimator.
Stuart did a lot. Stuart's brother, I think he's a doctor. I think he's a doctor, and he was the script consultant. And I know Stuart always would take his collaborators and do kind of field trips. So I know that they went to a morgue, and he did research with his brother at least, and I think that really showed, because the characters in it. I think one thing that really marks Reanimator, makes it stand out, is that the medical students, West and Kane, act like medical students. And the reason I think that is because all the doctors and medical students that I've ever talked to, they like the movie. And I think they like it because they can relate to the motivations. The other thing that's kind of remarkable about it is that what a good adaptation it is of the Lovecraft stories. The stories are not, there's 6 stories that were published serialized, and not at all Lovecraftian. Like they really, if you talk about Lovecraft stories, you would never think that a story like Reanimator would be Lovecraft, because it has it's just such a traditional, monkey's paw, or not even monkey's paw, because it's theoretically scientific, it's not Lovecraftian in that way. And it's a real old fashioned kind of, things crawling out of the grave kind of movie. But there is a real, the way Lovecraft, kind of tells the story of West's work. That's really, I think Dennis Paoli and Bill Norris and Stuart Gordon, the writers, I think they really distilled it down into the story just really, really well, with the things like the consciousness exists in every part of the body, or life, what it takes to bring something back. And there's a lot of, I just read the stories again, just like the last few months. And I am always struck by that, by the, how they simplified it and really brought it out clearly in the movie.
You said you hadn't read the stories when you got involved, until you got involved in the Reanimator, the movie. Had you read any Lovecraft at that time, or was he new to you?
I had read Lovecraft. I read horror stuff as I grew up, from the time I was in grammar school. In grammar school, I think I read all the original Grimm's Brothers, and all the fairy tales, which I think are pretty horrific. They're genre for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
And then I would read any kind of ghost stories or weird stories, so I was, and as I got into high school, then of course I read H.G. Wells, and I read Jules Verne, and I read like Bram Stoker, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And the thing that struck me, I liked H.G. Wells, and Mary Shelley, it would just seem terrible. It was, to read Frankenstein, it was just like, what is it? This is not at all like the movie. And Bram Stoker was great. I mean, it worked for me, especially the first part of it, the Jonathan Harker's Journal. The first part takes place in Transylvania. I mean, that's to me, I thought that was really good kind of horror stuff. I tried reading Lovecraft in college because I had heard of him. He's got a great name. There was a rock and roll band in the 70s called Lovecraft. But I remember reading him, and it was kind of like whenever something really good was going to happen, the main character would fall into a faint. It would be like, it always just felt like it was leading up and talking around it, and it never showed the vampire, or, it didn't do the thing. And so that kind of put me off of it. But and if you'll remember, Lovecraft was not considered something that you could sell in the movies. When Corman made a Lovecraft movie, I think it was Charles Dexter Ward, I think was the story that he made as Edgar Allan
And then he
Poe's
put the
Haunted
Poe name
Castle.
on it. Right, exactly.
No, he called it the Haunted Castle because Lovecraft, he was selling Poe, and Haunted Castle was just a poem of Poe's, and he used the Lovecraft story, but gave it a Poe name.
Yeah.
And made it seem like a Poe thing. So that was just, when I read the script of Reanimator and I loved it, the TV one, and wanted to develop it, and we went full. I mean, it was like exactly 1 year from the time I met Stuart in Chicago. And 1 year later, we were starting pre-production. So within that year, and I moved to LA during that time with my wife and kids. We developed the whole thing and got the movie going. But of course, I immediately started reading Lovecraft. You know, I read those stories and then I got interested. And once we started shooting it, you know, when you shoot a movie, you always talk about the sequel. I don't know why. It's just something you do.
Yeah.
But neither of us felt like the sequel would be another movie. And the one that we were going to, first of all, I immediately hired Dennis to write Shadow over Innsmouth, which I called Dagon, because I didn't like the title Shadow over Innsmouth. And we were going to do it with the same actors, because Stuart's like that, you know, he's a theater guy, so you have the theater troupe. And, but instead, nobody ever, but now I wasn't going to pay for the movie. I was over that. It's too stressful. Better to get money from people in the movies. I borrowed money for Reanimator, and for me, it was just terrible to have to deal with people who didn't have any concept of what the movie business is like and had totally unrealistic expectations, probably. And so I could never be somebody who goes around and gets a bunch of dentists and doctors, people from outside the business to put money into a movie, because I'd say, man, you're going to lose your money. It's better. But I have no problems doing it with a company that's selling movies. They're already in the business. They're going to look after themselves. But anyway, so we did make a deal with Empire Pictures to finance 3 movies, and because I'd given them Reanimator to distribute, and we picked a Lovecraft at that time. I went through all those, a ton of Lovecraft stories, and kind of came down to Dreams in the Witch House or From Beyond. And we decided, both of which I thought would be a good basis for a movie. And From Beyond is a very short story, but what was interesting about it was that it had this machine that changed things, and that's so we decided that would be the sequel. In the same way as I remember when they made a sequel to Psycho, when they made Psycho 2, naively, I was kind of shocked that it had Norman Bates in it, because I thought Norman Bates' story has already been told. Let's do another Psycho story, So that was, or with House of Usher, when Corman made Pit and the Pendulum, he didn't carry those characters on. But it was like a sequel, House of Usher, Pit and the Pendulum, Mask of the Red Death, Premature Burial, Tales of Terror. They were all in the same mode, but they weren't direct sequels. But then of course, once I started getting aware of the movie business, I realized that sequels are really more a celebration of the first movie than they are something. I mean, you can make them really good, but really people do want to see the characters again and everything, which I guess probably with Return of the Living Dead 3, maybe it was a mistake not to, carry it on directly. But so the From Beyond was the one that we developed into a sequel. But even then, we always talked about making Bride of Re-Animator. Like when we were shooting From Beyond, we were in Italy. We shot it in Rome, also with dolls. So Stuart and I went to Rome with the effects guys, and we shot over the winter there, both movies. And on when we'd be driven back, we'd talk about Bride of Re-Animator, you know, and it was the time of Ronald Reagan, and he had been shot, and kind of was never right after that, and was kind of had Alzheimer's or something. It was a bit, and so we just thought it'd be funny if the president was dead. He had been reanimated by Herbert West, you know. So we had this whole thing that we talk about as a regular sequel. Of course, when I finally did Bride of Re-Animator, it had nothing to do with that. I went in a totally different direction.
Interesting. How did it come about that that you directed the sequel? Was it ever going to be Stewart again?
You know, it's funny. Stewart had some pretty big representation, you know, agents, and because he had like a 10-year career he had only Reanimator was his first movie, but he'd been directing theater for 10 years. You know, he had a real body of work, and he dealt with pretty big actors, and he had connections through his friends. So we were, at that time, we were, you know, we were going in and pitching stuff, and while we were making From Beyond, we got the deal we sold the deal to make Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, you know, so things were moving up for us, you know. And at one point I was talking about doing the sequel, and he kind of indicated that his agent didn't think he should do sequels, you know, at that point. And also I got to the point, also I had to bail. I did 2 of the 3 movies I'd made the deal with Empire to do, Dolls and From Beyond. And then I was working with Stewart on Robo-Jobs. And, but I had to sue Empire because they never paid the money for Reanimator. I was, you know, I saw my great, you know, I thought I was going to get rich, and instead I was hiring lawyers to just try to pay back the investors. And when that happened, then I kind of just quit work. I had to move off of work.
I don't want to interrupt you, but Empire, that was Charles Band before he did go into Full Moon Madness.
Yeah, he and his dad and his brother. So of course I couldn't really be dealing with them when I was suing them. And so then I moved on to do other things. And I was actually working with Dan O'Bannon for a long time, developing a story called The Men that Dan was going to direct. And it was about a woman who discovers that all men are aliens. And I thought it was really a lot of fun. But of course, now I don't think you could make it too, you know, things aren't so binary now. But it was a real paranoid kind of thriller with sort of a sci-fi satire to it. And as I was, then he bailed on it, right when I got it financed. And so I just started feeling like I was losing projects because I kind of wanted to be the one-stop guy. So I thought, well, I'll just direct it. And a big part of it is when you work on a movie set, when you're on a set, I think almost everybody goes, I could direct, you know, I could do that, you know, I want to try that, you know. And so that's a pretty natural thing. So I thought, well, I'm going to give it a shot. And I found instead of doing the sequel to Reanimator with like a big company or something, I had a friend who had started up a small production, very low budget productions, and a sales company. And I liked what they were doing. And I said, well, listen, I'll let you guys finance Bride of Re-Animator. They were getting all their money from Japan. The one partner, Paul White, who I still work with, was living in Japan. And so at that time in the 80s, Japan had oodles of money. And so then they were backing this company called Wild Street. And so I said, we'll, you know, I'll let you do Bride of Re-Animator with me producing and directing and deciding what it's going to be like. But it has to be a 2-picture deal, and Bride has to be the second picture. And the reason I did that is because, you know, there's this saying that first-time directors usually make 2 movies in one with their debut film, their first and their last. And the reason is because it's one thing to sell promise, but when it's finally time to watch the movie, usually it's a failure. And so I thought, well, I've never had a film class. I've had no, you know, I mean, I was in my 30s before I came out to LA to make movies. I didn't grow up going, I got to make movies. And so it was, I thought that would give me a chance if it would make sure I had 2 chances in case I failed completely the first time. Maybe I could learn some lessons and have another chance. So it was, you know, then you start directing and you kind of like it, especially if you're producing too. You know, if you can really have control, be able to decide how to allocate resources, and, you know, and hopefully the movies can come out well.
So what was the experience like directing the sequel?
Oh, the sequel?
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, I had like 3-4 units going at once because I was signing the checks. They just sent me the money. I put it in the bank, and I mean, we wrote the script in, I think it was like 2.5 months from the time we started until we started pre-production, because I had a hard date to have to start production, I guess for tax reasons for the Japanese investors. I don't know, but it was great. It was, I mean, it was really kind of a daunting thing to do because, you know, Reanimator is so good and the fans are going to expect a certain type of movie. It's not like the first movie I did was Society. Well, nobody knew what that should be. I could do anything I wanted because it's not trying to match anything, right? It's not a genre. It's who knows what it is. And it was basically The Men, but with the class system and the class system instead. But it was that same paranoia that there's this big secret thing going on that you don't know about.
Do you think Society's gotten more popular lately? It seems like I think more people talk about it the last few years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It started like about 10 years ago. And before that, it always did well in Britain. But it also the British distributor also took the North American rights. And so they didn't release it in North America for a few years after it had been finished. I think that, and it did pretty well, like in France and Spain, and especially in Italy. So there were some places that it did okay. Well, this was way back before any internet or anything. So you just didn't even know about that stuff. You know, it wasn't like, you know, with Reanimator, we didn't even have a fax machine. You know, we made the budgets in pencil on forms. You know, so now, of course, you know how you're being responded to around the world. Festival, you know, horror festivals. It wasn't like that then. They could tell you it was doing good in Britain. What do you know? You know, it was. I knew it had been accepted here, but I never quite understood. All I knew was that the review in Variety was just awful, and that it just. I thought everybody was going to love it. You know, I thought, wow, this is going to be #1 on the charts. You know, the box office. And even my friends were kind of, you know, they didn't like it, you know.
I'm a big
And
fan.
so
Yeah.
I was very surprised, but I also know that it wasn't, you know, it was, a lot of it was very clumsy because of my lack of experience in directing. The tone was very weird. And so it never, you know, it kind of was disappointing, but I was on doing other things. And then in around the year 2000, I was able to buy the movie from the people that owned it, because they had sold all the territories. They said, hey, maybe you'd like to own it, pay this. And at that time I had enough money to do that. And so I actually bought the film, and then I started trying to put it out. I think Blu-ray was just starting, or no, DVD. This is first DVD.
Right.
But then, man, just it was like around, you know, about 10 years ago, all of a sudden it got this whole new audience, and it kind of became discovered, you know. And I think a lot of it was because the 80s became a big thing, and there's this interest in the 80s and this pre-digital and very independent time of making films. Because in the 80s, the first 10 years of video, man, there were so many companies, you know, it was really kind of wide open. And then in the 90s, they all started consolidating, and instead of there being mom and pop video stores, it was all Blockbuster.
Yeah.
They just milked you for every dime, you know. They had all kinds of rules to make sure that you had to pay more, and they also started determining how what the movies were going to be like. They would even read scripts, because the companies that were making movies like Return of the Living Dead, Trimark, well, what they were focused on wasn't making a big box office smash, because you couldn't afford the advertising it take to do a lot in the theaters. But they knew when it went to video, there's guaranteed money there. And all the conversations were about how much shelf space you get at Blockbuster. And if you got Blockbuster on board before you make it, then you'd have, because when you go to the store, it's like if you go to the supermarket and you're going to buy, I don't know, a can of beans or something, there's tons of people putting out beans. But you'll find that your supermarket will have their own brand.
Right.
It's like if you go to Costco, you're going to get Kirkland, you know, or Trader Joe's. They buy up stuff and they put their own label on it. And then if you go to Trader Joe's, there's basically going to be 50% of everything there's Trader Joe's brand. You're not going to, you know,
Right.
If you can't, you could invent the best candy bar in the world, but if you can't get it at the checkout counter, you're not going to sell it. And so that was the idea with Blockbuster. It's no longer were there all these independent video stores that would just grab up stuff they liked. It would be Blockbuster deciding what the movie should be like. And and so that was all that consolidation took it to there. And then with the video business, I mean, with the digital coming in, and everybody started doing everything digitally. So you have a whole certain way that movies are made digitally that's not the way they're made on film. On film, it takes a lot more light, and it's a bigger deal to move the camera, and you really set up every shot. Whereas with digital, you can just run around and shoot, and then do it in the editing, and the editing is quick, you know. And so it's a different feel. You don't get that sense of much more specific, you know, consciousness, except from certain filmmakers. And and then with digital, then they start doing all the effects digitally, which obviously on something like Jurassic Park, it really works. It really, kind of, it works on the real high end. But when you look at something like The Mummy that they made in the late 90s with Arnold Vosloo, when you see The Mummy, he had this gory kind of face, kind of desiccated and stuff, but it was really PG. Whereas if it had been a makeup effect, if you'd gotten Rick Baker to do it, and you had a skull and rubber hanging over and a puppet, it would have been, maybe R-rated, and there's something about that, the digital is really animation. So it's a very sophisticated 3D animation, but it's animation, and it doesn't affect you the same way. So I think that's a problem that, and then on the low budget, the digital effects are awful, because they can't afford, you can't afford what it takes to do really good 3D effects. And then you start having cheap movies where everybody can do the effects on their computer, and now we'll do this, we'll do that. And they do everything with CGI. They'll do smoke, they'll do sparks, they'll do blood splatters on the wall.
Blood spatter and fire really,
they just and they think that that this is really smart, but all it indicates to me is that the people making the movie aren't really into horror, because if they were, they'd know that's not satisfying. I'm not.
I honestly think that's one of the worst parts about the Walking Dead TV show is the digital blood spatter.
Oh yeah, is that what they do?
Mm-hmm.
So I think people started looking back at the VHS era.
Yeah.
And they saw how quirky it was, and how in some ways there's some things about it that were better. And when you look at the old stuff, sometimes you're amazed that people would accept the stories, the clumsy, stupid storytelling on some, when you watch the old.
I have a theory about I think even bad like practical effects has like there's something fun about it, where bad CGI is just bad and it's not even like enjoyable.
Yeah, it
has like a charm to it, I think, if it's
there's
even
something about puppets that work. Puppets always work. I've only done one CG creature ever, and I had built the real thing. It was a 40-foot sea scorpion, and we built the whole thing. It took 12 people with hydraulics to have it do this. It was huge. And I built a puppet to move it. But sometimes you've got to have the CG. And I tried to mix it up, putting CG eyes on the puppet and things that you can't do well with puppets. But then at one point I had to build the whole thing CG, and this was done in Brussels, but with a company there. And we were a low budget. And I saw the process of how you had to build a creature. This is a monster. And when I saw that process and saw the way that they budgeted time and money, then all of a sudden I understood completely why CG monsters jump around and do, they're so unreal. There's no sense of weight. And the reason is because they can only afford so much. And the shots are like 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds. And they'll say, well, listen, you're paying for it anyway. We can have it do this. But if you were a puppet, it would do this. you know, and so you see this kind of, it's cartoony, I think. It's just not, and you have one person comes in and does the armature, they do an animatic, they have somebody come in and put the skin on it, they have somebody else come in and put the lights in, they have someone else put the texture on the skin, somebody else does the wetness, and it's layer after layer, and you can't change it. Once you approve that animatic, it's just a process of putting skins and stuff. Whereas if you have a puppet, you can keep shooting and throw some smoke in there, have it do this until you get something that works. And I've seen, you know, a lot of the effects guys I know, like say Screaming Mad George, he can put his hand in a sock and it'll come to life. He'll make a creature right in front of you, just like a magician doing a trick. And puppets are disturbing and they work. You're really acting. Whereas with CG, it's animation. It's hard to do Pixar, you know.
Right.
But
and I think even
acting,
just as an audience member, even if you can't like say that, like this doesn't work for me for these reasons, I think your mind knows it doesn't quite work.
well, yeah, because most people don't care. All they know is whether they enjoyed.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to the movies. I mean, I guess everybody's kind of interested in the movies now, but generally, you either like it or you don't. And you like it sometimes just because of the person you went with.
That's very true. The
Or
experience.
there's
Yeah.
something, it was shot in your state, or there's lots of reasons why you might like a movie. But if you're interested in movies a little more than that, especially if you make them, you tend to try to break it down. You tend to try to deconstruct it to understand why you like it. And I remember I used to take my kids to the movies, and when we'd come out, I'd say, well, what do you give it? You know, from 1 to 10, what do you give it? And they would give it whatever they give it. And I'd say, well, why? And then I would tell them what I thought. And then they would go, you never like anything. And I'd say, no, I don't think, I'm just telling you what I think is good and bad about it and why I responded the way I did, which is not necessarily true, but it's what I think. But I think I enjoyed it way more than you did. If you go to an art gallery and you just look at a painting and say, I like that, I don't like that. Well, you probably aren't, the experience is probably a lot poorer than it is for someone who knows what era it's from, who the painter was, what kind of style it was, what it signifies. That depth of knowledge, you know, gives you a critical eye. And then when you see something that you like it in a much richer way. So that's one reason to deconstruct movies. But it's very difficult to deconstruct movies if you don't know how they're made, because you don't know what you're watching. A friend of mine, who's actually the writer, John Penny, the writer of Return to the Living Dead 3, after that movie, we became friends. And he's a big winemaker up in Carmel Valley. They make wine. Mm-hmm. And and I've learned from him the process. But when you taste wine, it's very difficult to go, I like it, I don't like it. You don't know what you're tasting. And you need someone to kind of talk you through it. But unless you know how the wine is made, how it changes, and what you can do to change it, well, you don't really know what you're tasting. And the same thing goes with a movie. It's very difficult to to separate the directing from the acting, from the script. Sometimes the casting can change a movie. And if you don't know the way a script is written, the way a production is mounted, what money needs out of the movie, and what kind of requirements they may put into it, if you don't know that process, it's very difficult to kind of know why the movie works for you or doesn't. You can always, you give an opinion, but I'm sure we've all been in heated arguments with people who are very sure about about movies, and sometimes none of us really knows what we're talking about.
Yeah. Along those lines, what do you think of film critics?
Well, I think they're good. I think it's good. Everybody's a film critic,
Sure.
and especially now
Yeah, right.
when you have Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
I really appreciate film critics because I think they go in two directions. One is that they have some theory that they have a higher appreciation of film, which often is the case because they see so much film and they have to write so much, and so they tend to sometimes overvalue things that maybe we wouldn't even want to watch. So the extreme of that would be, what's that guy's name, Brody at the New Yorker magazine.
I'm not sure. But yeah.
His stuff is very, and then at the far other end, you have the critics who are just trying to make sure that they're agree with the public. They don't want to be wrong because in this country, you know, in the US, we think the public is right. In Europe, they feel like the public needs to be educated. You know, in art, we think that people who aren't, if it's a box office smash, it must be good. You know, so they go in both directions. But I find that I really like reading reviews that that I kind of agree with, or that agree with me, because I like the reviews that put into words what I kind of think. You know, I kind of feel and say some feeling towards the movie, and I'm very opinionated. I'm not ever very mushy. I'll argue very strongly. But I look for a critic that puts into words the feeling I have. So, for example, one of the movies I watched recently was Tenet. And I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't seen it yet, actually.
Okay. Well, you know, it just seems like not a very good movie.
Okay.
But it's got a huge budget. And so there's all this stuff going on. And of course, most of the critics give it a good review because it's a huge movie and it's Christopher Nolan, and that's what's, you know, it's brilliant. You know, I mean, it's not, I don't think, but but and it's just not very entertaining, you know. But you look at it and you go, my God, how do you put it into words? You know, how do you you know, I want to find the critics that put into words what I felt when I was watching it. So I love critics for that. And it helps me then talk about it because I find someone who has put into words some reaction I've had. And then I can, you know, then it gives me a way to kind of encapsulate my feelings.
Well,
so yeah, I do like critics.
Yeah. I'd say obviously not Tenet, but do you have any current movies that you do recommend?
I don't know. I mean, I watch a lot of old stuff. I'm not real big on like binging cable series like everybody else I know. I know I'm really looking forward to seeing the new Pixar movie, The Soul.
I've heard nothing but good things
that might
about
be
it.
really good.
Soul was great. I loved it.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I really liked the previous one, the Coco.
Yeah, Coco was
That
super
was good.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes they really do a good job. I don't know. You know, they tell a real story. You know, you don't see that much. Everything seems to be very, you know, well, derivative, because everything is derivative, I guess.
Yeah, I want to ask a couple things about The Dentist because I watched it, you know, for the show, and I always liked it. And it's the first time I had watched it again for a long time. That's probably since it was on when I rented it. But I find it pretty scary because it's kind of like everyone goes to the doctor, or the dentist, and it's like it kind of comes down to what if your dentist who you're the doctor, whoever that you're putting like your faith into, what if he had a bad day? And that's what the movie is
Exactly. Well,
only like to the nth degree.
That is the whole point of it. The whole point is exactly that. It's like, what if your dentist had a bad day? You know, it's like you don't want to have that drunk, suicidal air pilot, you know, when you're taking off. And I think that was the kind of the brilliance of the concept, which was created by Dennis Paoli and Stuart Gordon. So they wrote the original story, and then they wrote a script, and then Charles Finch wrote another draft of the script. But it was all based on that basic idea that the dentist gets up, and he's a very fastidious guy, and he discovers that his wife is being unfaithful. And in the original story, he actually kills her. Then he goes to work, and the whole thing takes place over 4 hours. In the final version, it takes place over a couple days, and he only imagines killing her, but he's going cuckoo along the way, you know. But it definitely, it's funny because I got the job to make The Dentist. I was going to produce and direct it and develop it from the head of the company that I did Return of the Living Dead 3 for. So it was a company called Trimark, and the head of it was Mark Amin. And I remember after I finished Return of the Living Dead 3, we had lunch, and he had already made a poster for The Dentist, you know, which was just a drill in a chair with somebody. And his requirement, just like with Return of the Living Dead 3, it just had to have the trioxin and the brain eating. His requirement is it had to be focused on the dentist chair. It had to be about the experience of going to the dentist, and it had to be realistic. It couldn't have like supernatural, aliens, anything like that, which I thought would be much easier because I usually like to do weird stuff. And so it was much more difficult to find someone, a writer, to come up with a story. We went through, I think I read 20 or 30 pitches, you know, and met with people, and they just never, I couldn't figure it out. And then Stuart and Dennis had gone to see Trimark to do a project with them, and they had this idea of The Dentist coincidentally. And so the idea was, it just was great, you know. It's like you totally get it, and you're just going from person, you know, you're just watching people in the waiting room. And once again, just like once again with Stuart, I went with Stuart, and we visited dental offices, and we talked to the technicians, and we talked to the dentists to see how it worked, you know, and to get all the pattern and everything true. And so I think that I think comes off, that's reflected, just like with Beyond Reanimator, the second sequel to Reanimator, which I made in Spain, by the way. It was a prison movie, and the writer, Miguel Tejada Flores in Oregon, when we were developing the story, I wanted Wes to be able to have have a lab. I didn't know what could you do in a prison, really, right? Because in the movies, you just see them like doing the laundry, and, you know what I mean? The typical kind of prison movie. And so we went and visited 3 prisons in Oregon. I think one was in Washington State. A minimum security, a medium security, and a maximum security. Now, Wes was going to be in maximum security, and we went to the maximum security prison in Salem, Oregon. And it was like a city. And when you saw, when I saw the work areas that the prisoners could be, they can run their own businesses out of there. So they had every kind of tool you could imagine. And I thought, well, and they have a whole kind of hospital there. So I thought, well, that you sort of see how they move, when they ring the bell, how you get in, with weapons checks and bars going past you and you get in, and how they make the prisoners walk the line, and it was like a real eye opener. All of a sudden you see the classrooms, the library, and you realize, well, you could tell any number of stories in a prison, and people come in from outside, and so it made me think that, well, then it's no problem having them kind of create the serum there and all of that. So it's the same thing with the dentist. I think by visiting the dentist's office, we were able to develop the script so that we had the right cast of characters in a dentist's office doing what they did, and also hearing, talking privately with the hygienist and the people who work for the dentist.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize they don't always love the guy they're working for.
Right.
And they think they're could be pretty crazy, and different dentist offices look different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one it would be almost like a wood paneled study with a bar with exotic liquors, and another would just have a bare bones kind of almost like an accountant's desk. So a dentist can go in any different direction.
Uh-huh.
So I think that the version that we did was pretty true. I think Corbin was a very
Oh yeah, he really
believable
embraces.
dentist,
He really embraces the role too. He's great in the
Yeah.
movie, in both movies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, it's probably just a thing for me, but I always feel uneasy around people that are like super, like overly calm, and so right away.
Well, you hate to see
touches.
that needle coming towards you. It's funny. I had in 1998, I moved to Spain, to Barcelona, to do a series of movies there called The Fantastic Factory. And we lived right in the middle of Barcelona. And eventually I had to get a dentist in Barcelona. And the first time I went to see him, I went up and got in the chair, and I had the bib and the whole thing. And he got the needle's always real long because they have to get it deep into your mouth. And he had the needle, and as he turned, and of course they always squirt a little, he turned and said, I watched your movie, The Dentist, last night. And honestly, my heart just sang. I went, oh my God, this guy's doing stuff.
It's a weird thing to tell you right before he injects you too. Trista, do you have a question?
I'm actually just wondering what you used for the reanimating solution.
Oh, that's just luminol. It's what you get in the glow sticks. We just cut up a bunch of sticks and poured it into a jar. Well, there's two sides of it, of course. When you do a glow stick, you break it, which there's two chemicals, and there's a little membrane. And when you break that membrane, they mix, and then it glows for a certain amount of time. And what we did, it was actually Anthony Dublin, the effects guy, who came up with that. And he just poured it all. We had the two solutions. He bought a bunch of sticks or something, or I don't know if maybe you could get a jar of it. I don't think so. But he had one jar of one and one of the other. And then he would mix it up right before we shot. And the DP had done a test on how bright it was and how quickly it lost its power, right? Because you'd have to adjust your aperture if it's starting to get dimmer. So there's I forget how long you could shoot with it, but you're always having to redo the syringe, or, sometimes it didn't matter much, usually stuff like that, it matters the first time you see it a lot, and maybe on some key points. And after that, it can just kind of be green. It doesn't have to, look like a Christmas tree light. But at first, you kind of want it to look a little magic. But everything's like that in the movies. It's like the first time you see something, it's got to be, it's got to be much better than it has to be later on.
I saw an interview with you and Stuart Gordon where he talked about he originally wanted to shoot the movie in black and white, and I thought you wouldn't have had the green at all.
Well, at that time we didn't know what the movie was going to be
right.
like, and so if you're doing a sequel, you pretty much have this box you've got to kind of fit yourself in. But when you're doing an original movie, who knows? You don't know what it's gonna. What kind of movie it's going to be. At that time, I had gone to meet Stuart in Chicago at his theater that he was the artistic director of. And at first the idea was, we'll just shoot it there. And Stuart just thought we should shoot it like on 16 and black and white so that it would be really disturbing. You wouldn't know what, if this was going to be one of those movies that they really went too far on, really disturbing. But as I always thought, I remember when Driller Killer came out and I'd seen the trailer, and I always imagined a movie that was much worse than it ever was. Then you watch the movie and you realize, no, actually that sizzle really made you think something else. Same with Texas Chainsaw. I think you hear the title and you go, my God, this is going to be the most gruesome, brutal. And you go, no, actually, it's kind of like an art movie. It's just really good and really disturbing, but it's not at all what you would get from the title. I think that the idea, a Reanimator shot with minimal sets, like locations and black and white, it could have been really, really powerful, kind of like Henry Portrait of Serial Killer, but more entertaining. But that wasn't what I wanted to do. I had moved to Hollywood, and I wanted to make, a Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to do indie stuff. It wasn't indie, but you know what I mean. I wanted a movie that looked like the movies I liked when I was growing up,
Yeah.
And it was a real movie. And in fact, I even paid to have an orchestra do the score because I wanted it to be like a real movie that looked like it, and it did. It did. A low budget one, but it's absolutely like a Hollywood movie. So from that point of view, it satisfied me.
Yeah. I'll ask a few questions here from the chat, if you don't mind. Trash Arts in Portsmouth, in England. They say society gets stronger every time I watch it. A risky film that sadly constantly stays relevant, saying something about capitalism and class more than most films can. Not really a question, but a comment.
Well, thank you.
There's some here on Facebook. He also wanted to know, would you ever want to revisit Society?
Well, I'm trying to develop it into a limited cable series.
Oh, really?
Of course.
Yeah.
I wouldn't direct it, but I would certainly develop it. I think it'd make a good series because it's more a world that you're in. The characters, there'd be no reason to carry on the characters because that wasn't really what it was about. When you have Reanimator, you really want Herbert West. You want that character. But with Society, it's really just the star of the show is kind of the world, that weird satirical shunting world of class being even more separating than species. You know, it's like you're much more separated people from others by your class than you are by your race or your ethnicity or anything else.
When you were in the script for Society, like, is it like, do you go into specifics at the end with everything's going crazy? Like, do you write out like there's a guy with like a butt face and all these things?
Well, yes, in the sense that that the script, when you're going to shoot every day, the script pages should reflect what you're going to shoot. But the original script of Society didn't have any shunting or any of that weird stuff. It was more of a blood sacrifice type thing. But it always had the satire. As a matter of fact, I just watched a trailer by one of the writers of Society, Woody. He was called Woody Keith when he made Society. Now he's Zeph Daniel, and he has a movie that he just produced and wrote called Girl Next. And watching the trailer, you could really see a little bit of Society in the psychology of it, and it was straight ahead kind of horror, you know. So, you know, but the script of Society was already really funny to me. It was so paranoid, and there was such kind of weird characters in it. And the only thing, it was my first movie directing, and I just wanted to have effects. I wanted to have some effects that I hadn't seen yet. And so I imagined skin melding together, and then we started talking about how that could be part of the story. And we came up with the shunting, and we did it also in conjunction with Screaming Mad George, the effects artist, because he did this type of surrealistic sculptures and stuff. So it was a you know, all together it went, you know, it was me wanting it to be something fantastical, and I also tried to with the rewrites, tried to bring out more the class issues and the incest part of it, and the idea of making class be a almost a sci-fi notion basically was left over from working those months on The Men, where in The Men, the men were aliens. In this, I didn't want them to be that. I want them to be kind of like a parasitic life force, you know, a true blue bloods, you know. And so I just created a whole mythology to make it become something weird like the shunting. And the writers ran with it. I mean, we just meet and come up with stuff. And I'd look at what George was doing, and I'd talk to him. And we incorporated lots of his stuff just into it and tried to just make it just more like just like a lot of fun, like a theme ride. And if we'd come up with something, then we'd put it into the script. And so, yes, the butthead was written into it. All of it was written in. We had to build it. We have to.
Right.
You can't just immediately say, "Oh, hey, you think you could get a butthead over here? Put it on the bed."
Oh yeah, I got one in the back. Eddie 007 says he used to run a dentist website. He says, hopefully Brian remembers that. And he
I
was
do.
wondering how you got Corbin Bernsen in the film, how he was cast.
He was just on a list. It's back in that time, there was kind of a formula for low budget. Dentist is super low budget.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a formula for for making a movie with these certain companies, these mid-level companies. It's like I produced Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, the toy maker.
Which I'm actually a big fan
of. And that had Mickey Rooney, right? You say, Mickey Rooney? Well, there'd be a certain list of actors, and they would have X amount of money to put into an actor to put on the box, right? Mm-hmm. And so these actors, you just go down the list, you know? And so for Toy Maker, Mickey Rooney came in, and you're dealing, it's like, oh, now we're gonna, you know, it's fun because, you know, that he was like the biggest guy in the world for a while.
Yeah. And
so then you get to make a movie with him where he plays a evil Santa. Uh-huh. With Corbin, there was, I know at one point I talked to the agent of Chevy Chase about the dentist. It never went anywhere, but what a different movie that would be.
Yeah.
Or what if Bruce Campbell had been the dentist? It would have been totally different. It'd be much more manic probably. But Corbin, when he was suggested, I looked at some of it, you know, his product reel, and he'd never done anything horror at all. Mm-hmm. But he did play kind of like the bad father or something, or the angry husband, you know, he had that edge to him. And what I didn't know until we got into it was what a collaborator he was, so that he really always had ideas about his scenes. And, you know, a lot of times we used it. He had really good visual ways to for a lot of the scenes, because we were real limited in what we were doing. But he worked a lot. He knew what he was doing, and really had made a much more of a contribution than just as the guy hired to act. You know, he really you know, was part of a lot of the ideas of how to shoot his character.
They also said in the chat that they heard he wasn't easy to work with, but you seem to enjoy working with him.
He's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
We've had our troubles on set. It can happen with, especially actors. You know, they're way out there on the edge. You know, and he could be difficult, but you know.
That can be good, I guess, at some time if they actually care about the role. So.
I think there's something very strange about being an actor. You know, it's a very strange thing to do. And when you're playing a crazy guy like that, they kind of become crazy. But we did the sequel too. And he really went nuts there. I love what he did in the sequel, you know.
Uh-huh. Kermit wants to know, what Lovecraft story do you wish you could adapt that you have not?
Well, there's a lot of them. You know, I always liked The Thing on the Doorstep. I really love Dunwich Horror. I like that it's kind of just a half a story. It would make only half a movie. You'd have to mix it with something. But I like The Tomb, about the World War I submarine that is, I think it's German. It's being kind of magnetically taken down to the bottom of the ocean. It's kind of cool. There's just so many of them. You know, there's so many Lovecraft stories that you could do something with, but certain ones have a little more to them. So with the thing on the doorstep, the thing that really is great about that story is that it has to do with body switching. And there's a female lead in it. And in most of Lovecraft, there's no female characters. So you're always having to add them in as kind of a love interest or something. And of course, I guess you could just change male to female, but with the thing on the doorstep, it's about a magician who's changing, you know, he's in the body of the woman, and then he switches with, she, you know, I think she marries him, and then she'll tie him up and switch, and ultimately wants to have a male body because the magician would be more powerful. Of course, that's probably not working today, but that whole idea of the body switch, and I like, you know, within someone that you're intimate with that you can't trust, and this type of thing. I think that's a pretty good story.
Mm-hmm. Andre wants to know, what's your favorite body horror film?
I don't know. I guess I'd have to say Society, only because the body horror is really big.
It is.
I don't know. Everything is all horror almost is body horror. Every time there's a transformation, I don't know, The Thing, The Fly. You know, I don't know how much. What aren't body horror? The original Nightmare on Elm Street has some pretty cool body horror. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to you know. I mean, that was kind of a genre, a subgenre. But I guess any movie where there's any kind of transformation in a horror movie, I guess we'd call body horror. Somebody turning into a werewolf, or somebody melting down, or I don't know.
Yeah. I'll ask one more here. Madeline wants to know, will the plastic surgeon with Corbin Bernsen ever happen?
I wish. We have the script. We couldn't get the rights to do a sequel to The Dentist. We tried, because Corbin really wanted to do it. And so we developed a, you know, something similar, The Plastic Surgeon, which would just have more body horror in it than The Dentist. It wouldn't have the same punch as The Dentist, because we're not afraid to go to the plastic surgeon, because it's something most of us have no connection with.
Right,
Whereas
unlike
the dentist, we all go. But Corbin and I did go, when we were doing the script, we went and visited plastic surgeons and talked to them, and a little bit scary what goes on over there, I'll tell you. It's not, I mean, they're pretty free to do whatever they want, you know, and I think it would make a fun movie, especially with Corbin. I mean, I think the fun of it would be seeing Corbin kind of go bananas again.
Yeah. And Alan, he just wants to say, he wants to thank you for your movies, especially From Beyond, Society, and Dagon, and that From Beyond was his introduction to Lovecraft.
Yeah, that's interesting, because in From Beyond, the short story, I think it's only a few pages long. And actually, we used up all the short story before the opening credits of the movie. So, and we changed the characters. We made Crawford Tillinghast be we invented the character of Dr. Pretorius. But it was interesting. Hey, that has brain eating, you know, sucking it through the eye. And of course, we had the pineal get real big, which Jeffrey Combs wasn't real happy about, but he put up with it. And I think it's maybe Barbara Crampton's best movie. I think. I mean, it's her movie. She's the one that goes through the changes, but she gets, you know, in Reanimator, she's just like the girlfriend to be kidnapped, you know, someone who has to be kind of saved. But in From Beyond, she's she goes from being a very in control professional person, and then she step by step just becomes a blithering maniac at the end. You know? The last scene of her laughing with a bloody face and a broken knee after jumping out of the house. I mean, that's a pretty good horror clip.
Oh yeah. Trista, you have another question before we wrap up here?
I'm just wondering if you have any advice for aspiring filmmakers.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess just if you want to do it, make movies, you just do it, you know. I think it's a good idea to try to do it seriously and to try to, I mean, I don't know how you get to the point where you know what a story is or how to write a script, because I still have trouble with it. It just always seems like you're beating your head against the wall. And I think that it's a good idea to take it seriously and think about what you're, you know, how you're using the camera, you know, and not just, I mean, I'm not a big fan. Everything can work, but I kind of feel like, you know, you should have the shot be fixed if there's not a reason for it not to be, and put it on a tripod and not think that, oh no, we'll just get this and then we're going to get that. And when you see that, all that comes across, you know, I mean, every shot, the way the shots are put together and what the shots are makes a big difference. The framing makes a big difference. It's a good idea to try to think about that and try to take it seriously. And I don't know how you learn. I mean, sometimes I think there's a certain type of cinematic storytelling IQ that can't be taught. You know, I'm a basketball fan. I'm trying to remember who the players were. There was some player, rookie, that they, you know, a longtime star on the team said, well, I can teach him how to play in the NBA, but I can't teach him basketball IQ. And I think to a certain degree, you can teach people how to write a script and how to direct and how to do a camera. You can learn that, if not just on YouTube, at all these millions of film schools that are out there just dying to take your money and somehow make you think that you might get it back by working in the film industry, which is a pretty big stretch. But it's, I think some people just have an IQ about what they're, you know, how you tell a story in a movie. And I'm not sure you can actually learn that. I think you have to have some instinct, an instinct for that. But I think that I think that the worst thing to do is to just do it kind of in an easy way without just figuring that, hey, we don't need lights, because I mean, you could shoot with your iPhone. It'll shoot in low light levels. And people always say, yeah, that's a good thing about digital. There's low light levels. But, you know, when you have to light something, you're making a choice. You know, if this was daytime, I would just have the sun coming in. Well, I know that my screen is bright, so if I don't turn it down, you'll see the reflection of the screen in my glasses. Well, that's not good, right? So I've already had to make a choice to darken the scene. And that means I've got to come in and bring some lights, depending on how I want to look, right? And if the light's coming from one side or another, it means something. You know, usually it takes 3 lights. You know, you need one light to just lighten up the set, and a key light, and then so an edge light or a fill light. all this stuff matters. And, I sometimes think the best way to learn about shooting a movie, at least in a classic way, is to get on a darkened stage that there is no light, and you have to light it, and there are no sets. So you've got to make the walls and bring it all in. Nothing's for chance. You're having to make decisions. Whereas when you shoot, and you can shoot on digital, well, you can just go into any location and say, yeah, this is how it looks. Well, you haven't really made a lot of choices. So I think that, which isn't to say that you shouldn't go shoot, at the Starbucks or your basement or whatever. It just means that you should think about what you're telling with that image, and why anybody should watch the movie from one shot to another. When I'm making a movie, I'm always worried that I'm going to lose the audience. That if for 3 seconds their mind wanders, you may not get it back. And so I always think, wow, you've got to keep taking them, got to stay ahead of them, so that they don't, how every movie you get bored at one point. Usually they all keep your interest at the beginning, but at one point you get tired. It's 90 minutes at least long. And that's the trick, is how to keep enough going in your story, in your characters. You have to be very careful not to have a casting that looks like the characters are supposed to be, but then also have people who have the acting chops to be able to do those roles. And of course, most people that are starting out, they're going to use their friends as actors, and maybe they can work, maybe they can't, but you use what you can. But if you're dealing with people with less formal, that haven't been, kind of going to the different acting programs and stuff and learning a style of acting, well, you shouldn't give them roles that are outside of their experience. So it's okay to have your friend play a barista, because they probably probably something they could do. You probably don't want them to play like a big time lawyer when they're like 25 years old and barely got through college. I think that it's best to stay in with to stay kind of within your resources. So I don't know. I think do it, and try to let other people watch your work and listen to what they say, because that's another thing most people don't want to do. Even me, I don't want to do it. I hate having to show the movie while I'm cutting it or something. I don't want to hear people not think it's wonderful, because I'm afraid it's not. It's never as bad as you're afraid it is. It's never as good as you wish it was. And it's better to listen to people and try to get some professional people involved, people who actually have experience. But I don't know. I don't think there's any real good advice, except that if you want to do it, do it. Why not?
Even though that sounds like really like just like the most basic thing, but I think that is great advice, because a lot of people think of doing something, and if you don't actually do it, then it's nothing but a thought.
Yeah, and you can do a short film. Just fool around with it.
Yeah, and nowadays there's placed, festivals, or even put on YouTube, or something.
Yeah, but and the other thing, you got to do all the bits. You got to do the sound mix. You got to do the colorization. There's so many levels. Sound effect. It's building the soundtrack is a real thing in itself, and most people don't want to do that, because they can just record the sound, and they don't realize that a lot of what you're getting from a movie is the complete package. When I moved to Spain, people used to, the people I worked with there, they'd say, hey, how come these American movies sell everywhere? you have these American movies here and they're terrible. You know, we got movies that are better and we can't sell them. And I say, yeah, but the cheap horror movies or cheap genre movies, whatever, from LA, maybe they're not very good. We know that, but they're a real movie. And it's the equivalent if you're going to go to a restaurant, it could be you could get better food at a street vendor, you know, but you may go to a restaurant that's quite expensive. And if you're thinking about the money, you might go, wow, I could make this better than this at home, you know. But what you're getting is a white tablecloth and nice dishes and low lighting and people serving you. And that whole ambiance, that whole package is what you're paying for, because you want to go out to dinner. And if you're watching a movie, it could be really great, but if the technical parts of it aren't built the way kind of a regular old commercial Hollywood style movie is, well, you don't want to fight it. You know, you want the good lighting and you want the careful, you want the good cutting, you want the sound effects, the music, the atmosphere, all the sound to work right, the Foley. You want when people walk, you can hear their clothes and their footsteps, but not too loud. And all that stuff takes, I mean, it's, you know, everybody wants to make a movie. They want to be the singer-songwriter. They want to write it, they want to direct it, they want to edit it, they want to shoot it, they want to do the sound, they want to do the music, because they think that's what makes them an artist. And the problem is that just writing a script is a whole craft of its own. Directing's a whole thing. DPing, I'd much prefer to have a director of photography that shot a bunch of movies and all he thinks about is the cinematography, you know, and let me tell him what I want and let him bring what he has to the table. And the same thing with a writer and an editor. A lot of people edit their own movies and it's fantastic. You know, I think Roberto Rodriguez does, you know, but for me, I want to have an editor who looks at the material fresh. He doesn't come in with all this, you know, I'll look at a shot and know what we went through to do it, and I'll value it a different way. Mm-hmm. Or I'll not like something because it didn't work the way I wanted, and I'll have a negative attitude towards it. Whereas the editor will just get all the material and see what he's got and maybe show you something and do it properly, and not, you know, everything doesn't have to be your personal stamp. You don't have to sign every prop and every frame, and, you know, but that's what a lot of people want to do. And also, you can't get other people that are any good to do it unless you pay them. Well, now you got to get a bunch of money. You know, now you're producing. And I, you know, it's just a very complicated process, but if you want to do it, you ought to do it.
And do it right is what you're saying. Yeah. And
I
by the way,
take it seriously.
Yeah. Right? What you said about the editor, just from doing the show, I've noticed that usually the best people who edit their own stuff are people who are editors by trade, because I think they can see it.
Could be if they, yeah. I mean, it just depends. I like collaborating with people. I just like to be able to make the decision, set the direction and make the decision. That's what but I like working with other people, you know, but some people they can write and direct and edit it, or, you know, some people do that well. And yet sometimes we see this stuff, you know, you see these big movies and you see the director writing it and you go, God, couldn't they have gotten like a real writer, you know, to write it? Because sometimes that's the weak part. Something can be brilliant at the whole directing and making it, and maybe the story, they just need a better writer, maybe.
Good. Well,
Hey, listen, I got to go.
I was just gonna
So-
say it's been great having you on. I know we're way over the hour we told you that we were gonna do. So,
Well,
went
it was
2
my
hours.
pleasure.
Yeah.
It was my pleasure. And hey, have a happy new year. I, for
Thank you.
one, am very happy. I'm not gonna complain about seeing 2020 in the rearview mirror.
Yeah,
Hope that
Agreed.
2021 is going to be good for all of us.
I agree.
Bye-bye. Happy
Bye.
New Year.
I thank you so
Happy New
much.
Year. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, so we're gonna be doing our 13 Doctors of December here. Now I can play a video or something if anyone needs to get a drink or anything, or we can go right into it. It's up to you guys.
I can go right into it.
I can. Too.
I'm a diehard, Chief.
All
I
right.
can do it.
Okay,
Good
cool.
because I had nothing lined up.
You
to play.
lied. You were just open.
Yeah.
We weren't going to call your bluff on it.
Yeah.
And then I would just ramble as I go and do stuff.
I got a quick game of Parcheesi to play, and then I'll come back.
All right, excellent. But yeah, big thanks to Brian Yuzna for staying so long. I knew we were way over the hour, but I thought it was going really well, and I thought we'd see how much we could get. So, and it worked out good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was lovely and inspirational.
Yeah. And Trista and I recorded an interview earlier too, which is going to be up on the website probably tomorrow sometime. And interestingly enough, some of the things talked about with Brian was also talked about in this other interview.
Ooh, can you say who it's with, or is it?
Yeah, Aaron
See.
Moorhead and Justin Bernsen, I believe, who made Synchronic.
Oh,
And there's some Lovecraft and pineal gland. I forget how to say that word. And it's interesting. There's some crossover. So let's see here. We're gonna first of all, this is the last. I believe this will be the last live show of 2020, unless something happens. But I'm pretty sure this will be the last live show of 2020.
yeah, we're running out of days, I think.
Right. Yeah. This is tomorrow. There was going to be one other guest, but he hasn't gotten back the exact day. So we might have another doctor in January, but I think we'll make it work.
Good little carryover. That's all right.
Exactly. So, the good doctor out there came up with the idea of doing the Doctors of December, which is a cool thing because we're going to talk about, doctors in horror. And also we're giving some tribute to the real heroes of 2020 here, which is a little weird to say because we're probably going to talk about not so good doctors here on the show.
That's true. I think I might have one or two doctors that aren't like evil doctors, but
Sure.
not many.
So big thanks to the good doctor out there and for Trista for
Yes,
making
great
this
idea.
happen.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
And I'd like to preface mine by saying that because I had the doctor advising me, mine are actual MDs.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
But we obviously have a lot of respect for PhDs and super glad to have one in the White House instead of a supermodel. And I know it's like a weird thing right now, but
Yeah.
we have the utmost respect for educators and PhDs. Just for this purpose, we went with MDs. That's
Yeah.
all.
I try to do the
Disclaimer.
same thing, but I probably have some that aren't necessarily. But all right.
I don't
so-
know all the credentials of everybody on my list. So I
Right.
can't say.
Right.
Unacceptable.
I just want to say, we're at the Dr. Fibes didn't make my list because he's not really,
What?
but he would make my list just for the greatest doctors.
Oh, yes.
People with
Yes.
doctor in their name. All right. So I'll start with 13. I usually go last here.
Okay. Start us off.
My 13 is the original Halloween because Dr. Loomis is amazing. And I've always, if it wasn't for the Loomis character, Michael Myers wouldn't be really that scary because he doesn't necessarily do much. He kills some people. That's cool. But Dr. Loomis sells the
Big
horror
time.
of Michael Myers. He's like, first of all, I always like this in movies when it's someone of science or someone who the opposite of the supernatural, and then they come to a certain point where they themselves believe the supernatural. So there's a great line in the movie. He's like, he spent so many years trying to reach him, and then he just realized he's evil, and boom, because Michael Myers can't speak.
Yep.
So how do you present him as just this evil being through Dr. Loomis? So,
and Donald Pleasance is so good.
oh yeah,
in that.
maybe he shouldn't be higher on my list, but yeah. 13 Halloween. Excellent
choice. All right, my number 13 is Dr. Caligari. He of the Cabinet, and one of those cool silent flicks that, like, it's got a great look to it. I don't really think the story's like one of my favorites, but like visually, I love the movie. Yeah, that's my number 13.
I am going to be embarrassed to say I have never seen The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
It's worth watching.
I should watch it.
It's kind of like the Golem, I think, where like it's the look of the movie so good.
German expressionism is
but then
Nosferatu's on
the payoffs, it's okay.
I need to watch it. I even put him in the banner without seeing the movie. I know it's terrible. That is my New Year's resolution, to watch The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
All right. Did you see the Golem? Maybe you should brush up on all your silence. Okay.
I'd also like to watch a lot more Hammer films, because I'm not really I'm not seeing a lot of Hammer horror.
Get the stepping on the hammers, fella.
Well, we've had actually opportunities to have some more Hammer people on the show, so I should definitely watch it. Very interesting. I won't give away names, but a lot of women in the Hammer horror, which would be very great guess.
Yep.
Number 13, Trista, you weird actor.
My 13 is Anything for Jackson.
Oh, awesome.
It's one of my favorite films of this year. And I thought Julian Richings was amazing in his role. And it was a great interview that we just had on the show.
I agree 100%. I didn't even think about putting the list, but that's an excellent choice. And that may make an appearance when we do our 13 of 2020, because I agree is one of the best movies I've seen this year. Excellent choice. I did not think of. Number 12. And we even had him on the show for this month. Number 12 for me is Dr. Channard, I believe his name is, from Hellbound, Hellraiser 2.
Oh.
And again, sort of in a way like Dr. Loomis is a little different, but I like the fact that he's like this evil guy who he's the reason why the Cenobites are back in the sequel. Because he's using the box, and he's using his own patients as like guinea pigs to bring these the Cenobites back. He's a very evil man, and then he himself becomes a Cenobite, and he is pretty cool looking guy. The big
what is he?
Big worm, the big penis worm on his head.
It's been a while since I've seen that one, so.
Yeah, I watched them all not that long when we did Hellraiser month, and I watched all of them. I'm not a huge fan of Hellbound, to be honest, but I do think it's a cool character, and I do think it's a good movie. I think they overstepped a little bit. I think they tried to do a little too much with the movie, but I still like it. And he's my number 12.
All right, my number 12. I have Dr. Giggles, which it's a really cool movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, and great kills, and he's just a cool character.
I think it's one of the underrated slasher films.
I agree.
Very fun movie. Larry Drake's amazing. Maybe higher on
awesome
the list.
That's understandable.
Yes. The Dirty Dozen for Trista. Yes.
Okay. Arachnophobia.
Ooh.
I love Arachnophobia, but I haven't seen it for a while, so I didn't explain.
So Jeff Daniels is a doctor, and the doctors have to work with the exterminator, John Goodman, who I love, to solve the problem.
He's so great, man.
Yeah, he really is.
That's cool, because not too many of these do I have a heroic doctor.
Yeah. Same here.
And at first they kind of think he's responsible for the people dying, which is interesting. Like he's not a good enough doctor, I think. Or he's like missing something. I think an old lady dies and she had just become his patient and they thought he missed something, but it's really the spider bite.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
Real quick here in the chat, the Barbarian Sasquatch says, I have a question. How did you get Richard Stanley for that wonderful interview a few years back? I actually thought about trying to get him back for this month to talk about Island of Dr. Moreau for Doctors of December month. I mean, I just asked him to come on the show, but it is one of a great interview. Go back and watch in the archives or listen to in the archives. Unfortunately, he was actually on video, but we weren't doing video yet at the time. And it's really unfortunate because Richard Stanley was in his castle in France. It was an amazing backdrop. He's sitting there in like an abandoned castle, smoking not tobacco. And yeah, it was an amazing interview. So yeah, definitely recommend watching that. But thank you for bringing that up. Excellent number 12, Trista.
Thank you.
My number 11 is fresh in my mind because I watched it for this interview, and it's a much I don't want to say like a better movie than I remember, but it is. It's a better movie than I remember. And I liked it at the time, but I think I like it even more now. And that's The Dentist for a lot of the reasons I brought up. I think it's inherently creepy because we all have this like fear of the dentist. And then to add to that, like you already have the fear because the guy's doing stuff in your girl is doing stuff in your mouth. And then I think like the sounds are already creepy, the drills and the dental sounds. But then to add to that, like, first of all, you're thinking, well, he knows what he's doing. My dentist knows what he's doing. But then to add like, well, what if your dentist will off or he had a bad day? And then it adds this whole other element and it makes it a very creepy movie. And Baron Corbin, not Baron Corbin, the wrestler, Corbin Bernsen, the actor, he really nails the role. And as I mentioned in the interview, I do not like really, really soft people who talk like this. It makes
You wouldn't go to a Mr. Rogers dentist? Is that what you're saying?
No, I actually like Mr. Rogers, but now you bring it up. Maybe
Fred Rogers though had that.
He did, yeah.
Really super.
But I think he was genuinely nice. But usually, who's the singer? I'm trying to think of. I should think of. Anyway, there's a singer who this is way too soft singing, and it really puts me off. And ASMR has the opposite effect on me. It makes me uneasy. It makes me angry. So I don't.
I've known people like that will watch him and actually get like really angry.
I get it. Smooth jazz freaks me out. It unnerves me.
Understand?
Yeah, okay, I'm glad that my peep here are with me. All right.
Yep. We're behind you, Chief.
So weird.
And also, I can feel your pain with the dentist because Neil and I both went to a dentist at one time.
I was going to bring him up.
An ex-military dentist, and you could tell when he was having a rough day because, like, he'd put his knee in your mouth and spread your jaw open, and
he
was a rough guy.
He filed one of my teeth down with Novocaine once, which was not a good time. And I almost brought this up in the interview because he did a root canal. He did a couple, both of them fell apart. But anyway, he did a root canal, and so to do it, you have to heat up this element. Like I think it's like the epoxy or something. You had to heat up something. And he literally had a Bic lighter, and he's like, "Oh, I got this at Job Lot, which is this closeout chain here." He's like, 99 cents, Bic lighter. And I was just like, "What the fuck, dude?" And then, and I clearly remember a couple other stories with him real quickly. One, it was when gay marriage was people when they're trying to legalize gay marriage, and he just starts going on this anti-gay marriage rant while he's working on my teeth. I'm just like thinking, like, he doesn't know anything about me. Like, I'm not in agreement with this. And why would you even start to have like this kind of conversation with someone you're like that's like the most like
that's kind of inappropriate right there. Yeah.
And then I also remember this was it was very poor.
Well, you have more experiences with the guy than I did.
Yeah, very poor at the time. I had no money, no insurance, and so he said I needed a deep clean, which was like to clean in the gums. And so he sent me this other specialist, and he's like, but he used like telling me he's like this horrible guy and blah, blah, blah. So I go to him and he's like this old hippie and he's awesome. And he just like, I was pretty young at the time and I didn't have insurance. And he's just like, oh, just get out of here. Don't worry about it. And he didn't charge me anything. And I was like, this guy's way cooler.
Wow.
And I think the other guys didn't like him because he was like, probably for
He might have been pro-gay marriage, right?
But yeah, he was just awesome. And I always remember that. He's like, just get out of here.
Well, I didn't mean to dig up those old wounds. I'm sorry. I'm just saying that he was kind of rough and stuff.
He was. I'm not a fan.
No. My number 11 is Dr. Loomis, who's already been mentioned.
Very good. By the way, no, I'm just kidding. Number 11 for Trista.
My 11 is Jacob's Ladder.
Oh, nice.
And Lewis Black is Jacob's doctor in the film, and they're doing these medical experiments. It's a great movie.
That's one I actually wanted to revisit for this list because I hadn't seen it for a while. And I wish I would have revisited. I revisited a few movies, but that's one I need to watch again. I haven't seen it for a long time. And I think when I saw it was when it first came out, I was kind of young, and I don't know if I appreciated the movie. I was probably like a teenager when it came out. Good choice. My number 10 is Pet Sematary.
Didn't even think of that.
I wanted one heroic doctor on the list. And he's a good guy.
Well, Loomis is kind of heroic too.
Is he? My question.
Ooh.
Is he heroic? Did he take a troubled child and make him worse? Is he the reason Michael Myers, or is he really inherently evil?
Wow.
That's
Never
my
thought
question.
of that.
So anyway, Pet Sematary. And again, I was like I mentioned earlier, so he's a man of science, and I think it adds to the horror, and it adds to the movie has a dread to it. And this man of science, he's bringing back, his loved ones through some kind of weird, witchcraft in a way. So I like that about the movie. But I also like the interaction with him and the ghost, Pascal.
Yeah, that's great stuff.
So that was number 10.
My number 10, Dr. Hyder from Human Centipede. Who,
maybe a lot higher than that.
Dieter Laser, really good, just great in that role. Just a really cool, evil scientist doctor guy. He's the man.
Yeah, I have my higher on my list. Should I talk about it now or should I talk about it then?
Either way.
We'll talk about it when we get here. All right. Number 10, Trista.
My 10 is Brain Dead.
Nice.
Which is a movie I love, and I really like Bill Pullman in it, and I like Bud Cort too.
That's a movie I haven't seen for a long time either. I remember seeing it at the theater. That's one I have to revisit as well, so I don't remember a lot about it, but I remember enjoying it at the time. Number 9, Flatliners, which I don't know if they might not necessarily be villains, but this one I rewatched for the show, and I probably like a little more than I did at the time. Great cast, great ensemble cast, pretty much everyone's starring it, and just a really interesting movie. A lot better than the remake. The remake is the remake's weird. It's because it's got it's almost like a sequel. I don't know, but
I don't think I've ever seen the remake.
It's not particularly good. It's also just kind of like pointless. Like you already had the movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, number 9 for me is Flatliners. I like it.
Good choice. My number 9, Dr. Polidorius from not the one from Reanimator, which I like him, or not Reanimator, From Beyond, but the old Bride of Frankenstein character.
Oh, okay.
Doctor that brings a little homunculus, tiny people, and befriends the monster and gives him a little bit of speech and stuff. A great character, I thought. Just really not a nice guy either.
Great pick. I didn't even think of it. Number 9, Trista.
My 9 is Antiviral, which is a film that I love, and I really enjoyed our interview with Brendan Cronenberg.
I did as well. Excellent choice. You
I
really
don't know
cool
if I've
outfit
seen that
tonight too,
one.
by the way.
Thank you.
really
I do like
the,
that. That's a great look.
Thanks, guys. Is that why we kept the show going? Because you are attached to this outfit.
I am. I just need to. I could watch it in later for all eternity, but I'd rather watch it live here. But I love the fly. It all works. I had something I would wear myself.
A mutual,
With
someone
a
we
snowman
both know
suit.
is where I got the flower, which is
Right.
kind of funny.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a very interesting. We talked about before. So off there. Number 8, The Invisible Man.
He might be much higher on my list.
I was debating: is he a doctor or scientist, or does it not matter? But so I just went out. It doesn't matter. He's the Invisible Man. I think it's the most underrated, underappreciated Universal monster movie. I think it's a fantastic film. I put it right under Frankenstein. I think it's one of the greatest villains ever in movies. He's incredibly he's a fun maniac.
Yeah. And
He's like-
sympathetic. He's got it all. He checks a lot of boxes.
and he even like is horrible. Like he throws a train off the tracks and like kills like hundreds of thousands of people. But at the same time, you kind of root for him.
Dr. Jack Griffin.
Awesome special effects for the time.
Yep.
Iconic look. I dressed up as him once. So that always goes up in my list if I dressed up as him. But yeah, Invisible Man.
Excellent
And then,
choice.
The asterisk under that is the son of the Invisible Man from the amazing, one of my favorite comedies, Amazon Women on the Moon.
Oh yeah. That's one of the best scenes ever. That's just such a good thing. Blimey, there must be a ghost in here. Oh, did we freeze?
I think just Neil did. Can you hear us, Neil?
Neil is perfectly still. He's been bitten by a snake, I think.
He's got such a coy little look, doesn't he?
I know, that's the perfect shot. I love
I
it.
know, it's perfect. And it's Christmas. It's
Yep.
so sweet. He's so happy.
I'll always remember him in that shot.
Well, maybe he'll call back in. I hope so.
Well, we can always do the first half of our list now. And then, now I don't even see him anymore.
No, I think he'll probably leave and come back, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I hope so. Well, are we on number 8? Has your 8 been mentioned already?
No, my number 8 is Dr. Gogol from Mad Love. Christopher Lee. I'm not Christopher Lee. Peter Lorre. He's just awesome in that movie, and he's wearing a big fur coat when you first meet him. And Lorre shaved his head. He just has this great evil look about him.
Oh, wow.
Oh, welcome back, Nick.
Wow, that's weird. It just like returns.
You were like teleported, I think, for a
Can you
moment.
see me again?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I completely lost internet. And then when it came back, like it reconnects this, and I think it reconnected us live too.
Oh,
And
wow.
it
Good.
continues to record. Crazy.
Oh, should I say my 8 again then, or do you think?
Yeah, because I think we probably would have lost it.
All right, my number 8 is Dr. Gogol from Mad Love, Peter Lorre.
Oh, nice.
Even shaved his head, and he's got a big fur coat when you first meet him, and it looks pretty damn cool.
Awesome.
Young, dapper Peter Lorre.
Nice.
Dr.
I'm a huge
Gold.
Peter Lorre fan.
If you've never seen Mad Love, I
I've not
recommend
seen
it.
Mad Love.
Because then you also have, there weren't a lot of movies with,
My lighting's not as good now, but that's all
who's the guy that was Dr. Frankenstein in the original Frankenstein?
right. You should know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should too.
Colin Clive.
Is that his name? I think
Yeah.
he doesn't
He
get
died
enough
young.
love.
Yeah,
because
he died young. He
everyone
wasn't
thinks
in a
of,
ton of
of
stuff.
the monster, but he's
But
the
he's
actual...
also in it. He's also in Mad Love.
Oh, okay, cool.
He's real good in that too.
I'll have to watch this.
It's a really good movie. Laurie's great. He's obsessed with this woman in it, and just gotta have her. And he's this brilliant doctor. He's very arrogant, and nothing that he wants is gonna be out of his range. He's just gonna have this woman no matter what. And yeah, Mad Love. Check it out.
Awesome. I will check that out. I like these picks because Trista has a bunch I'd like to revisit, and you have ones
I know you guys we're all over the place.
Yeah. So
Trista, your number 8.
My number 8 has already been mentioned, and it's Pet Cemetery.
Oh, excellent. Excellent choice.
Yep.
Lucky number 7. This will probably be on everyone's list, I think. A Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, yep.
I mean, what more can you say? It's Hannibal Lecter.
Yep. One of the true icons of cannibalism.
I also do think, though, that the Hannibal Lecter, actually, I think all 3 actors who played Hannibal Lecter do a really good job. And I do think that the Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter is really underrated. I think it's starting to get a little more respect than it used to, but
yeah, one needs
underrated.
Some love. You're right.
And I really like the series too. Until the last season, I wasn't a big fan. But
and Mads is so good in that. The Great Dane himself.
But if I'm going to pick one, I'm going to pick Silence of the Lambs. I also prefer Hannibal Lecter behind the bar, but in prison or in the mental. I think it's more effective where he can, because it's like shown he has so much power without being physically out in the world.
Agree.
I think it's creepier. All right, number 7 for you, Troy.
Number 7, I bet will be on everybody's list as well. Dr. Henry Jekyll, who then will become the villainous Mr. Hyde. But Dr. Jekyll, he's number 7. I thought he'd be higher on my list, but as I was making my list, I was like, great character, but there are better ones.
He didn't actually make my list because I don't have really I love the character too, but I don't really have I don't really love any of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movies.
Yeah, that's understandable. There's go back to the old March one. That one's real good. There's actually a good British one too with Christopher Lee in it, and it's really good.
Same reason I didn't have another Doctor on the list because I'm not a big fan of any of the movies, but I love this Doctor. But we'll talk about it later. Someone will probably have on the list. So you're number 7, Trista.
My 7 has been mentioned, and it's Dr. Loomis from Halloween as well.
Excellent. My number 6 is The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I think this is one of the better modern horror movies. Really took me off. I didn't know what to expect from the trailer. And it's a really original movie. It's a movie that really, you don't know what's going to happen. And it really just sucks you in, and there's not necessarily a lot of action, for a long period of time in the movie. But I love it. Really original film. It's good stuff.
Excellent choice.
You're number 6, Troy.
My number 6 is he's been in 3 movies that I know of. Dr. Moreau, but I think I'm gonna go with probably the original one. I think it's always best to go with the original. But
That was the person I was referencing.
oh,
I
okay.
don't really love any of the movies, but I like.
Did you ever
I
see
like
the Island of Lost Souls?
a
the
long
original
time
one?
ago,
Yeah,
not for a long time.
because yeah, just a really cool character messing around, you know, where you shouldn't be messing, and turning animals into people, and yeah, who
Yeah, I'm not. See, that's one I wouldn't be against the remake.
well, the last one, like even at Brando is Dr. Moreau, and they still
Yeah,
couldn't
but
get it
that
right.
was-
So
No, that was the documentary about it is fantastic.
It's amazing, actually.
Agreed.
Yeah, with Richard. That's why I booked Richard Stanley years ago, because he's just an amazing character.
but I even enjoy the 1970s one. It's like it's got good color and a lot of things happening in it.
And
Yeah.
a
And
dark
Burt
note.
Lancaster, you know.
A dark note on the Richard Stanley interview is he predicted the Weinstein stuff months
Really?
before it came out. He was like, this is going to come out about Weinstein, and he told like personal stories about his his not involvement, but his what he witnessed, and that's part of the reason why he left like Hollywood.
Man.
So number 6 for Trista.
My number 6 has been mentioned as well, and it's Hannibal Lecter, The Silence of the Lambs.
Do you have a is it Silence of the Lambs, or do you have a one that stands out?
You know what's funny is I actually, just now when you were talking about how effective it is when he's in that cell, I agree with that 100%. And I didn't even realize it's something that sort of sticks with me and I think of often. It's such a crazy power move, right? Because you think like, how could this person be effective?
Mm-hmm.
So
Hey, you
it's,
think you'd be safe from him? He's behind
yeah.
bars.
Which makes it
Yeah.
that much creepier, I think.
Oh yeah.
The stakes are so high. I think the whole time you're wondering what's he gonna do? How's he gonna do it? So I love that as well.
Excellent choice. Number 5 for me is Day of the Dead, the third Romero film in the zombie. Well, it's not a trilogy anymore, but to me, it's a trilogy.
Yeah.
There's some
Might
movie
be a
actually.
sextet now or something like that.
Yeah, I was not a fan of it as a kid. Most people who know the show, I love Dawn of the Dead and I love Night of the Living Dead. Dawn of the Dead is my favorite zombie movie ever. Day of the Dead, I could never get into as a kid. I thought it was kind of boring. But when I watched it later in life, I had grown to really like it. I still think there's stuff about it. I think the acting is way over the top. But I think it's a really good movie. And I like that it's really the battle of science versus, I guess, the military or whatever. But I like that aspect of the movie. And the doctor in it. Now, there's more than one doctor, but the doctor who's trying to
Main doctor.
Yeah, trying to work with Bub, I think is great. It's creepy and he's just a weirdo, but you know, it's good stuff. But it's a great movie, and also that has anything to do with Doctors of December, but some of the best zombie effects.
The effects I love in that one. You're right. Yeah, that one still has never really grown on me. I've tried it like since I was a younger person, but I don't know why.
I really like it. It's not my favorite of those,
one.
but yeah. There's I get it. There's stuff in it I don't think's perfect by any means, but I like it. I also like it as the progression of the movies. Yeah,
the main military guy. He's so great, man.
Yeah, we had him on the show. What's his name?
He's just a madman in it.
Yeah, he was a little.
Yeah, I guess he's just kind of a madman in real life. Too.
Yeah, I remember Annabelle mentions he was a little creepy to her, but she found it funny. That was number 5.
My number 5's been mentioned by both of you guys, and it's Hannibal Lecter. Dr. Lecter is my number 5. Not really anything new to add except for, I don't know. I think I'm in the minority. I prefer the Mads rendition. I do. I just think he adds a little flair to the character. I really like.
Yeah, no,
Maybe I just have a man crush on Mads. I don't know.
he's a good actor.
He is. I love the guy.
So that's number 5. Number
Sexiest
5.
man in Denmark, I'll have you know.
It's because I'm not. Because I'm from the Cape.
Yeah, you're not Danish, and then it would have to be a recount.
Right. Number 5, Trista.
My number 5 is Contagion, which I only saw for the first time after the pandemic. So to me, this is the scariest movie ever
Right.
to happen.
Mhm.
And there's some great doctors: Kate Winslet, Lawrence Fishburne, Marianne Cotillard. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Cotillard, I think it is. She's French, but they're all hugely talented, and it's a very effective film.
That's an awesome choice. I actually didn't think of that, and Root definitely fits. And again, I like that it's heroic doctors in horror. Excellent choice.
Yep.
If it wasn't for Trista, all our doctors would just be menaces.
They'd all be creeps and stuff. Yep.
My number 4 has been mentioned, but I've always loved this movie. I remember seeing it at the theater, and I just had a big smile on my face. I'm not even a huge slasher guy, but I think it's an underrated slasher movie. It's Dr. Giggles. It's just fun kills. Larry Drake is just has.
He makes
you
it.
can tell
He's
he has
just
a
so
ball
good.
playing
Yeah.
him. Yeah, it's just a fun. I think of just a fun horror movie with Dr. Giggles.
Yep. It's one that always reminds me of like an old EC comic kind of thing. You know, just
He's a
the
perfect
guy
guy
goes
for
off
that.
the rails and just goes nuts.
Yeah, and if I'm just gonna think of just the best like killer doctor, it would probably be Dr. Giggles.
Agreed. Or my number 5 or number 4. I'm surprised he hasn't been mentioned yet, but I'm thinking he might be later. Dr. Phibes is my number 4.
I love Dr. Phibes. I didn't put him on my list just because what I said at the beginning, but I love Dr. Phibes. Are my favorite movies.
Gotta go Vincent Price, Nobody's Cooler. And Phibes just kills everybody in these wonderful ways, and just awesome. Just see if we got a band that's like all robots and stuff. You don't really see him speak because he doesn't, he speaks through his little voice thingy. And yeah, Dr. Phibes, my number 4.
Movie I watched a bunch of times. That's probably the first Vincent Price movie I watched as a kid, I would think.
Yeah, probably is.
You're number 4, Trista.
My number 4 has been mentioned as well, and it's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Nice.
Which is a film that I love. I love German Expressionism. I think it's beautiful.
Yep.
Excellent. I feel bad that I've not seen this movie. I hope I don't get kicked off here.
You're on probation now. You'll have to decide in a week or so.
I'm gonna watch it before next show.
Okay.
My number 3, Troy mentioned, much higher on my list. Human Centipede, Dr. Hyder. Absolutely love it. Most people fixate on sewing people's ass to mouth and all this stuff in the movie. That's obviously part of the movie, but to me, that's really not consequential to the movie. The movie is about Dr. Hyder and about he's a megalomaniac, and it's about dehumanizing the 3 people in the centipede, and it's so different from the second one. The second one, he's like this weird, he's like sexually attracted to it. He doesn't even look at these people or any sexual attraction, anything like that. This is his experiment. The greatest scene in the movie to me is after he makes the centipede and he kisses his own reflection in the mirror.
That is a great scene.
Just an amazing scene. And
he is the consummate mad scientist. You're right.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I want to bring up. It's a classic mad scientist movie. It's even got like the old cliches. It's these women stuck out in the rain. Instead of a castle, they come upon his house. It's set up like a very typical old mad scientist movie, or even just an old horror movie. So yeah, I love it. Human Centipede.
Yep, agreed.
I also love part 2. Part 3,
Ooh,
do without, but
not so much.
And a big thanks to Bill Mosley for telling me to watch A Human Centipede, because I'll be honest, I remember when it was coming out and we said, I remember like just talk about the premise. I was like, who the hell wants to watch this movie?
Yep.
That was the first time we had Bill Mosley on, and he was just like, I don't always say this, but as an actor, this is a performance that I loved. And like, he really put it over for no reason. It wasn't like he's in it or promoting it or anything. And he just really put it over. And I was like, well, I got to watch this. And I did. And I agreed with him.
And then I was still dragging my feet until you watched it and told me. And then I finally gave in. And I really enjoyed it too.
Yeah. And one of my favorite guests, Dieter Laser, great guy. I had him on the show a couple times. One of my favorite interviews, definitely with him. It was also, I'll put this out there. There's nothing, I don't want to say anything bad about Dieter, because I love Dieter and he's a super guy, but it was the hardest interview to ever edit, because he asked me, he'd really put me over. He said, you're the most perfect, like go overboard, put me over. But he wanted, because English was his second language, so he wanted everything edited perfect. So anytime he didn't quite understand me or vice versa, so I had to go through the whole thing and edit out. So it was perfect for Dieter, but he appreciated it. He was very, and I got to meet him in LA, which was very cool for the Human Centipede 3 premiere. All right, Troy, you're number 3.
Oh, my number 3, I don't think he's been mentioned yet, but Dr. Herbert West, the Reanimator. Just, I just love all the movies, actually.
I agree.
And
what's the other doctor who gets his head ripped off?
I can't remember his name.
He deserves to be mentioned too, because he's pretty awesome.
Doing the West thing down. Yeah, just Jeffrey Combs is so good.
He is. How could you
just
imagine
perfect.
anyone else playing that role?
Yeah, and he's so straight when he's doing it, and like just everything's just. I love that movie. I loved it the first time I saw it, and I think I love it just as much now when I watch it.
Agree. You're number 3, Trista.
My 3 is the horrible Dr. Hitchcock.
Ooh.
Which I love. I love Barbara Steele, and it's a great homage to Hitchcock.
I don't think I've seen this.
Oh, you haven't? It's good
I
stuff.
recommend it. It was really subversive for its time, because it's about this doctor with a necrophiliac tendencies, and it came out in the 60s. So.
Oh, that's right up my alley. Necroneliac. Yeah, no, I'm all about this. No, I'm going to check this out. I don't know this.
I haven't seen it in years. I really like the movie, though.
Huh, very cool. This is good. So my number 2, Troy just mentioned, Herbert West, Reanimator. It's just amazing. I loved it ever since I was a kid. I still love it today.
Yep.
I remember going to see it. It was probably longer now, I think, probably 6-7 years ago. But it was playing midnight at Coolidge, 35 millimeter, and it was like an old print. It was an uncut print. In fact, it was a longer print than most of the uncut versions. So I'm not exactly sure what all was different. But anyway, and I went to see with Annabelle, and Annabelle had only ever seen it on our local channel, 38 or whatever, and they cut out a lot. So we were seeing some scenes she had not seen before. And I was just waiting. I was like, oh, if you think that's weird, wait till you see what's coming up. And so that was something to watch with her and see her reaction. But it's a great movie. You're number 2, Troy.
My number 2 is Dr. Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man, who's already been mentioned.
James Whale. It doesn't get mentioned enough when people talk about great horror directors.
So true.
Frankenstein.
So totally true.
Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man.
Yeah. Even the moon's afraid of me. Look, it's terrified.
Your number 2, Trista.
My number 2 is Dead Ringers.
Ooh,
I actually watched this earlier today.
did you
Oh,
really?
really?
Yeah, and I had it borderline my list. I have honorable mentions. I almost put it in, and then I kept moving stuff around. But yeah,
I think he's so great as an actor, just both roles. He's
Mhm.
really great. I think he could have gone really over the top with like the good twin, bad twin, but it's very nuanced. Both performances are very nuanced.
I agree. It was. I actually was not a fan of it when I was younger, but watching it again, I was like, "This is a really good movie." It probably didn't hold my attention when I was young, but
It's a more adult film.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
it is.
But yeah, it was great. It like I said, it kept moving in and out of my list here. But that's an excellent pick.
Yep.
All right, number 1. It's probably no surprise to anybody. Dr. Frankenstein and the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. They're both fantastic movies. Like I said many times, he doesn't get enough attention because it's
Colin
all
Clive.
which he deserves a lot of attention too. Don't get me wrong, Boris Karloff is the monster, but the real villain of the movie is Dr. Frankenstein, and
Yep.
a tremendous performance. He's alive. It's alive, and he really when I mentioned Dieter Laser when he's kissing Dr. Hyder, I mean it's basically the same idea. He's brought life. He's done this thing, and it's a very similar character.
Yep. Yep. It's also my number 1. Like you can't go wrong with Dr. Frankenstein. He's the man.
100%.
My number 1 is Get Out.
No, awesome.
Ooh. Oh, she threw the curveball on that last one. I like it.
I think it's a perfect movie.
I love it too. I didn't even think of it to be on the list for some
I
reason.
didn't either.
But yeah, I think it's one of the best modern horror movies, or best modern movies, really.
I agree. And Caleb Landry Jones is on my list twice because he's in Antiviral and he's in Get Out as completely different characters.
Yep, those just I should watch that again sometime.
Yeah, I haven't seen it since it first came out.
But yeah, fantastic movie. Excellent pick, everyone.
Yeah, everybody like great picks. Always have so much fun doing the list.
I do too.
Agree.
I like these theme months. We'll try to do some throughout the year. I know in January we'll do our 13 movies of the year. It's I don't know. I'm trying to get Mitten, my man Mitten, the headless critic, but he doesn't know if he's seen 13 movies this year. I don't know what's going on with this guy.
Man,
to slap him around a little bit, keep him in check.
Get him back into the fold, man.
But we'll look over it this time, but never again.
Oh.
So, any honorable mentions anyone wants to bring up?
I got a few. I got Dr. Van Helsing. He was almost on my list, but he didn't quite make it. Dr. Crane, who becomes the Scarecrow in
Batman.
Cool.
Interesting.
Thought he was a cool character. Dr. Frankenfurter.
That's one of my own.
Ton of fun.
Too. Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Wolf Frankenstein, who's from The Son of Frankenstein.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's Basil Rathbone, and I really like that movie too. That's one like I don't think it's definitely not Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, but I still think it's one of the upper tier Universals. It's before they got desperate and started doing like House of Frankenstein and just jumbling up characters and stuff.
Any from you, Trista?
No, you guys always cover mine. It's hard for me to get one past you.
Yeah, the only I think ones you guys all mentioned. The only one, the Fly. I actually prefer the original Fly. I know most people like the remake, but I like the original. And Frankenstein's Army, which is the Dr. Frankenstein again, but it's really not a perfect movie, but it's very fun, and I love the idea. And the monsters are tremendous. And the best, really, I think the performances kind of take the movie down for me, except for the guy who plays Dr. Frankenstein is excellent.
Agreed. Then that whole movie seemed to be ripped off with there was some big budget Hollywood one that did almost that same movie, but not
it really
nearly
was
as well.
Movie.
Yeah.
I remember it came out just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called, but
yeah, for people not familiar,
was crap.
Frankenstein's Army is about the Nazi Germany, World War II, hiring Victor von Frankenstein to create an undead army for the Nazis. It's actually a pretty cool idea. It's the monsters are tremendous in it. Well, the undead that he creates, very creative. With some work, it could have been a perfect movie, or a great movie. Maybe not perfect, but anyway, it's still worth checking out. I would check it out. And yeah, Dead Ringers and some other ones that we mentioned. That was very fun. It's been an excellent show.
Got a good time, guys. Thank
you.
Yeah, and since it's the last show of 2020, from Troy and myself, we want to say thank you, Trista, for joining the show.
Hell yeah, you made a great year for us.
Oh, thank you guys. I've been as you know, like, it's such a crazy year for everyone, and this has been really special for me, and it's enhanced my knowledge and my community and myself. So thank you very much.
You brought just a ton to the table with us, and I don't think we've had like not a fun show since you've been with us. It's been just a good time every week.
Excellent. So we will be back next week. I'm not sure who will be on. Someone will be on.
We'll be on.
Yeah, if nothing else, we'll be on. We'll be doing the 13 show at some point for best. Maybe we'll do that next week. Oh, we'll figure out. All this month long, every month we're gonna have help spread the head. You like the show, I think. Or else you probably wouldn't be watching. So share it on social media. Let me know about it. And I keep all the names. And every month, at least once, we'll give away a prize. And this month, January, we're giving out Train to Busan Presents Peninsula on Blu-ray, thanks to Wellgo USA. And
nice.
This is the sequel to Train to Busan, which is an excellent Korean zombie film, one of the best modern zombie movies. And I have actually not watched this yet because I have to give it away. I kind of want to keep it open, but we're gonna.
I haven't seen it yet either. I definitely have to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
On this weekend's watch list, I think it's Sunday on BBC America. The Watch begins, which is the late great Terry Pratchett, and he had a bunch of characters from the Discworld that they were the night watch of. They were the city watch of Ankh-Morpork, and a bunch of great like crazy fantasy characters. One's a troll. There's a dwarf. There's an Igor. There's all kinds of fun people assembled there, and their adventures in the city of Ankh-Morpork in the Night Watch. So if you have the BBC America, check out The Watch this Sunday. And it's very polarizing so far because some people think that they're ruining Pratchett's characters. I'm going in with an open mind. We will see.
You've liked The Stand so far. That's another one I've seen some people hate and some people like.
After 2 episodes, I love it. I think it's not exact. Like they've changed some of the characters, and like the timeline is different. They don't start it from the very beginning. You see some stuff that happens like after Captain trips and everybody's in Colorado, and then they flash back to like their origins, which some people don't like, but it's been fine with me. So far, so good with it. I really dig it so far.
I'll have to watch it, but there's so many streaming sites. Every channel has a paid streaming site now.
It's true,
but I do want to see it. All right, we'll be back. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year, folks!
As Barbarian Sasquatch says, "Happy New Fears." That's kind of
Ooh.
Happy New Year. I've not seen before. I like it. I'm gonna steal it. All right.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.